2020, or in this case, the 1920s. And in today's video, we are making a men's vest out of 2 thrifted blazers that we got from the thrift store for literally under like $1. And the reason we are making this today is because somebody did not go to the thrift store and buy a vest.
Why would you not do that?
I don't know. I don't know why I wouldn't do that. And the reason I decided to upcycle 2 blazers is because by the time I went to said same thrift store that somebody was supposed to go to get a vest, they no longer had any. I decided to take 2 blazers that looked really good and make them into a vest. So here is the tutorial. To start this project, we're using 2 men's vests from the thrift store. We're using a lighter one in the front and a darker one in the back because typically you see that men's vests have 2 different contrasting colors. And I looked everywhere to find a pattern for a men's vest and nowhere seemed to have good men's vest patterns. So when I looked on the internet, I found the basic shape of the pattern, and I also found this men's vest at the thrift store. So I'm going to use this wool vest as kind of a guide for how big my vest needs to be, but I'm going to use the pattern as kind of the guideline for how the vest needs to look, if that makes sense. And as with any project, people are going to be curious what you're doing, which is why my little curious cat was wandering around going, "What are you doing, Mom? What's going on?" So I'm going to take the most depressing piece of my newspaper that I can find. For some reason, I always seem to happen upon the obituaries. You will see that in a later piece. That is what I always get. So find your most depressing piece of newspaper possible, and then you're going to half your vest and then trace around it so that you get the neck hole and the armpit holes in the correct places. And then because my friend is very tall and my newspaper is not as tall as he is, I'm going to add a little bit to it for that point that vests have. And this is where I actually made a mistake. I made this point actually go out a little too wide. So the point really needs to come in more towards the center of your person. So make sure that your center point is in the correct spot. See what I mean about this point in the final reveal? It was something that really didn't matter overall for the aesthetic, but for me, it bugged me. So just make sure that yours is in the correct place. And then as always, make sure your pattern is approved by management and make sure that they get a nice good chew out of the corner of it. So next up, I'm gonna cut 2 identical pattern pieces out of the front. And this way I'm gonna have a dry fit for my friend to make sure that it fits him. When I initially put the pattern on him, I realized that the neck hole was not actually big enough. It was hitting him way too high. So I'm going to trim a little bit off of that initially. So now for the back of the vest, I'm going to lay it out flat and I'm going to do the same thing where I trace around the outside of it all the way around, and then I'm going to half it once again. I'm not great at making pattern pieces exactly mirror image themselves. So when you half the pattern piece, this is the way to make sure that they mirror each other. So next I'm going to do a dry fit of my pattern. So I'm going to pin all the way around it with pins just the way you would with normal fabric. I'm going to make sure to especially pin it in a way that will stab my friend in the shoulders. It's a great way to get your friends to really trust you to make garments for them. And again, this is what I'm talking about. I picked totally random pieces of this newspaper and I got the obituaries. I'm then going to have my friend try it on again. As I said before, I stabbed him repeatedly in the shoulder after telling him I would totally not stab him. So like, if you want me to make you clothes, that's your warning. You don't want me to make you any clothes. I'm then going to cut that front neckline down a little bit more because it was still just way too big on him. So I decided to add a little more to the front piece of the vest to make it a little wider. I think I was accommodating for the fact that there are buttons still sewn in my original garment, but now looking at this, I'm wondering if I didn't need this step and that you should always add to the sides and not to the front, because this is where my little lapel thingies at the front ended up being in the wrong spot. All right, we're now going to cut in the final material, which is always a little bit terrifying. So I actually have the pattern lined up with the buttons and also with the collar. I definitely wanted to keep the buttons in the buttonhole because this way you can really crank out vests really quickly and you don't have to add those back. Bonus feature, I was actually able to keep all of the pockets on this vest, which can we talk about the fact that my dress had no pockets and this jacket had 4 pockets. What do men need 4 pockets for? I would really like to know that. If anyone knows, please let me know in the comments below. I would really like to know what they need 4 pockets for in one jacket. But anyway, soapbox aside, I'm lining it up with the buttons and also with the collar because originally when we looked up inspiration, some of the vests did have collars. So I thought like, oh, I can totally keep this collar. It'll look really cool and really finished. You'll see why the collar collar does not stay later, but that is what I was lining it up with. And then I'm just going to cut out around this pattern, and I am leaving a little bit on the side. That way, in case it was too small in my pattern making, I would still have some extra on the side, because it is always easier to cut away than it is to add back. And then I'm going to take my piece I just cut out and I'm going to lay it back down on the other side, and I'm going to cut around it. That way I have two identical pieces. Next up for the back panel, this is why it's always good to sew with your friends. I had lined up the back panel with the top of the vest thinking like, oh, the armpit holes, this will be a logical place to put this. And my friend goes, why don't you start at the bottom? That way you have a finished hem. And I was sitting there thinking to myself like, oh my gosh, that is genius. I should definitely do that. The downside to this is that you have to cut your pattern perfect the first time, because obviously you cannot add back to it easily because you are using that bottom finished edge. But this definitely worked out super well. And I was like, that was really smart. And I don't know why I didn't think of that. So if you're using two blazers, definitely start from the bottom. So after cutting out my 3 pattern pieces, I'm then going to pin them all together and again, have my friend try them on. He's really loving trying this on every time. Trust me. I wish I had recorded some of his info where he was literally like, stop poking me, stop. Again, if you want me to make you clothes, you really actually don't. So friends, for any time when people ask me why I never make clothes for other people, this is why. I have somehow made this vest the most unattractive thing possible. So we are trying to figure out if it's the collar that doesn't fit. You think it's the collar's too big? Or if it doesn't fit here in the sleeve, because maybe that needs to be thinner.
Both. We work for the collar first.
But the point being, it don't look good. So after having him try it on, I realized that a lot of places like in the shoulders really needed to be trimmed down because they were just way too thick. And I was really sad about this. I really wanted to keep this collar. I thought it really made the vest look good. And he looked at me and he was like, the collar's gotta go, Katie. It does not look good. It makes me look horrible. So I really tried to keep it, but in the end, the collar did have to go. It was so much better without the collar. I can't even describe it. So I'm literally going to fold the collar over to where it naturally fell, and that's where I'm going to cut it down, because that way you get the good look that the vest would have had. And it's a natural way of knowing like where it should cut. And then I'm going to pull out some of these basted seams, which were basically like holding the inside and outside layer and also where the pockets were. I'm pulling these out so that I'll be able to turn the garment inside out when I go to sew the hemlines. And also again, on my rant, why does he need 4 pockets? I get no pockets. Why does he need 4? I don't know. So I'm not really that hurt about hurting a couple of his pockets. Like, he doesn't need that many anyway. So after trimming one side down, I'm just going to lay it on top of the other one, and then I'm going to trim it accordingly. So again, I'm going to trim off that collar to make them both the same, and I'm going to make sure that both armpits are the same. So next up in this very confusing clip, I'm going to wrestle this vest to basically turn it inside out so that I can sew along the wrong sides of the vest to make it look like it was made in one continuous piece. This part's a little bit hard because of the fact that the garment was already sewn together, but in the end makes a huge difference. It makes it look so stinking good when you turn it around the correct way. So then I'm just going to sew a straight stitch along the wrong side of the vest, and then I'm going to make sure just to trim any of the little corners off so that it'll lay flat, and then I'm going to take it to my iron and just press it over, and oh my goodness, looks so stinking good. So when you're ironing something like this, you just want to make sure that the top layer of the fabric is folded a little bit over the bottom layer of fabric, or at least have them even. This is something that's not as important around the collar line because both of my pieces of the collar were the same color material, but down in the bottom, because I've cut away a lot of the tweed fabric, that is where the lining would show. So you just want to make sure that that is folded over correctly. And then I'm just going to repeat this process on the other side by sewing that down as well. So this next step is optional, but because my lining fabric kept kind of showing through and it was bugging me just the ever so much, I decided to go all the way around the vest with a top stitch. Now before, this suit jacket did not have this top stitch, so I'm not sure if that's something that men's clothing typically has, or if that's something I've just decided to add and I'm gonna call it decorative, but I just couldn't take having that little lining show just ever so much, so that is why I'm going all the way around with that top stitch just to lock it in place. And for the bottom of the vest, I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did with the top neckline. I'm just going to pull it apart as much as possible possible. And then I'm just gonna go all the way around that bottom V by pinning the right sides together and just with a simple straight stitch going all the way around. So you're just repeating the process. So after you have all of the front pieces sewn together and ironed flat, I'm now gonna go work on the back side of the vest. So because I had cut it open, I'm just going to do a basic basting stitch where I'm just literally sewing a straight line all the way across to hold the lining to the main fabric. I know I probably should have turned it over in some much fancier way than I ended up doing, but because this is a costume and not a formal piece of clothing, hey, I'm cheating on this and I'm doing what is easier. So the next step in this process is that I'm going to sew the two shoulders to the sides, and I actually pinned everything together, looked at how it fit, and then decided that I wanted to sew both the armpits together independently and then sew them to each other. That way I could use matching thread. Because obviously these are two different colors and one is lighter than the other, I wanted to make sure I was able to use light thread with the light side and dark thread with the dark side. That way neither one of them would have the thread showing everywhere. But I did like the fact that I pinned this together because that way you could make sure that the two places where the shoulders meet are the same size, and you can make sure that your armpit was at the same place. I know you guys didn't ask for this random piece of information, but this vest is 55% silk, 44% wool, and does say that it is dry clean only. And I washed both of these in my normal washing machine with normal laundry detergent, and they both seem to do absolutely fine. I did hang dry them, but just in case you ever get pieces like this and you're afraid like, oh, they say they're dry clean, but should I wash them? Just throw them in the wash. They're secondhand anyway, they will be fine. So then I'm gonna cut off that tag because it would get in the way of when I'm sewing. And with that matching colored thread, I'm just gonna go around all the armpit holes. And in the middle of this, I decided I would try and use my serger to make the edges look a little bit better. And I ended up getting 4 stitches in before breaking the needle in 5 places in my garment. So then I decided I would just grab my pinking shears, which I call waffle scissors because they look like they would make waffles if they were not fabric scissors, and I'm just going to cut off all of that kind of raw excess material to make the edges look a little bit nicer, and this also helps prevent fraying. And in a total streak of luck, I actually got these for less than $1 at the thrift store. I think they were a quarter. I have no idea why. These are normally super expensive, but I found them at the thrift store and I was super excited. So I'm gonna totally use these for this project to clean up all of those gross looking edges. That way if anyone does see them, they will not look nearly that bad. This tutorial on how to make a vintage 1920s inspired vest. I really like this tutorial, especially if you can't find a vest at your local thrift store, because this is a way to upcycle clothing, which again would have been something that you probably would have done in the 1920s. You probably wouldn't have necessarily went out and bought new stuff. You probably would have been upcycling stuff. So I think this is a great way to do that. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, or give it a big thumbs up for my friend Josh here, who was a willing victim. I mean, wait, not a victim, a willing participant in this adventure. Super nice of him. Thank you so much for helping.
No problem, so much fun.
And if you're not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button down below, because I make tons of tutorials about fashion and costumes and upcycling, and sometimes even men's clothing, which is a new one for me. A little bit difficult, but like, we got it. He looks like a 1920s vintage man-esque. He's in his 20s, that kind of works.
It works.
Maybe you're in your 20s,
it's
1920s,
yep.
That works.
We're not gonna go how high, but it's fine.
We won't go how high. Like early 20s, but not. Anyway, yes. I hope you guys have a fantastic week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! This looks ridiculous. I don't know if I want you in my frame anymore.
I shall leave.
Do.